All right, here we sit. I'm excited on this one. This is he's younger than me, but I'm fanboying out. Just looking forward to talk to you because I have watched your documentary many times. I made my kids watch it. My wife watched it. She loved it. I'm sitting here with Matt Rutherford.
How's it going?
It's going great, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem.
So Matt and I have been emailing. I just took a chance and emailed you, and you answered. And said, yeah, come on in. And we've been working on schedule, and it finally worked out. So I am sitting here in your sales office, which is Eastport Yacht Sales, and in Annapolis, Maryland. And so people that have seen your documentary, which for the last month and a half, I've been recommending it to everybody on my podcast, saying, hey, watch this. He said he's going to do my podcast, so whether he does or not, I want you guys to see this first. Because it was pretty inspirational to me and a great lesson for young and old. So thank you for putting that together, and thank you for having me here.
Yeah, no problem.
So what I want to do at first, and I know we don't have a ton of time, so I want folks to go watch the documentary, obviously.
Okay.
So don't give me the detailed of your youth, and it's very important, but I people that don't know the story need to hear you had a little bit of a troubled youth, and then you moved forward, kind of found yourself, and then got into where the documentary is, and then we'll get into what you've been doing since. So I know you've done this a million times, and what I like to not do is interrupt and ruin your flow, because I know you probably have a way you like to tell the story. So I'll let you go from there if that's okay.
So at some point in the late 1960s, early 1970s, my dad got involved with a cult. At the time, it was called Truth Fellowship. Sometime in the 80s, the cult leader kind of wised up, made a really intelligent decision, and eliminated the name and just called it Group from there on out. Group sounds a lot less cult-like, I guess, than something with an actual title. But basically, my dad was struggling with drugs and stuff. He's sort of a hippie in the 60s, and the cult leader, Dorothea, who's a female, who she claims that in like the early 1960s, God came out of the heavens and made her the most enlightened person on planet Earth.
Of course he did.
Yes,
I'm going to turn you down just a tad, so keep talking.
Yeah, no problem. And so I would love to, at some point I need to spend a little more time trying to talk to people. Maybe my dad isn't the best person, but just, I'm curious about some of the origins. Like, how do you go from being a person who you think God came out of the heavens to actually having a following? Like, how does a cult leader build a following? So the nuts and bolts of that one. But she did, and at first...
I wonder if it's a little like social media followings. Right. You think?
I wonder if it's easier now that social media exists,
Yeah, that's probably a great point.
Yeah. But... it helped him with the drug thing at first, and I guess it seemed relatively positive, and he met my mom, and she got involved. Of course, she had to. Sure. You're not allowed to know anybody outside of it, really. At one point, they tried to get a commune. Thankfully, the funding fell through. A lot of us did live on one street at one time when I was growing up in Ohio, so they did sort of try to live in an area.
Okay.
But yeah, and then as she got older, the group, at one time, the cult was several hundred people. But as time went on, it sort of dwindled down. And it's the old thing, like the tighter you clench your fists, the more slips through your fingers.
Sure.
So she just got older and nastier, and she liked to build people up and tear them down. She liked to use people against, play a husband off a wife, or a son off a daughter off of a father, whatever, brother off a sister. Right. It was just, I guess, it's sort of the tactics that these cult leaders use. And I got out when I was about 10 years old, and we didn't really discuss much about like what we had been through or what I grew up believing, because I grew up believing it completely, like with all my heart. This lady was like Jesus, the next Jesus sort of thing, basically, some kind of prophet or Messiah or whatever. And so, there was never like a time where we talked about what I grew up and believing or what that world was and what the real world is or any of that sort of stuff. And so I just a couple of years, maybe I was 12 years old, 11, 12, something like that. And it just sort of hit me like, wow, I grew up in a cult, and the whole thing, I don't remember the exact moment, but it just sort of hit me. And, I lost, I guess at the time I lost some respect for my parents, because it's like, how the hell could you believe this nonsense sort of thing?
Sure.
And I was young, and, when you're young, all sorts of things are going on in your head. Yeah, over time, I just became, well, one thing is, if you're a kid, let's say you're 13, 14 years old, and you get in trouble, all right? Dad punishes you, dad yells at you or whatever, spanks you or whatever it is. You fear that at some level. And part of it you fear is the confrontation of him being angry. But part of what you're fearing also is the respect, the loss of respect. You don't want to look bad in the eyes of your parents. You don't want your parents to be mad at you, and,
Right.
But if I didn't really give a shit, I guess, is what I'm getting to. So I didn't care if my parents were mad at me, because I didn't have respect for them in a way that I would have cared if they lost respect in me, sort of thing.
Sure, and you're like, if you believe in that, how can I respect you because I don't believe in it? I understand it. I've got some friends that are in religions that I've talked to, and they either decided or found out that what they were believing wasn't true, and they were lost for a while.
Yeah, it's interesting.
They just, well, it was what you believed your whole life, so
Right.
you're not really sure anymore of what to believe. So you're very distrustful and very angry, and you go through the whole stages of anger. So yeah, I understand what you're saying and feel you there.
It's interesting to believe in something completely, like you're saying, and then realize that one day it's all sort of BS. But the long and short is, I was just, and I'm not saying that the way I handled it was the right way or a good way or anything else.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to put blame anywhere. It's just what it was. And to say nice things. I mean, we always had a roof above our head. We always had meals. I had a bed to sleep in. It's not like my parents did their best in other ways.
Right.
But I got older, 14. I think I got my first felony when I was 14. I don't remember because I was drunk out of my mind.
Woo, 14?
Yeah. And then I had a couple more when I was 15 and 16. And so by the time I was 16, I've been locked up 5 times. Been to rehab twice, but the rehab was court-ordered stuff more than anything else. It's like they didn't know what they put me in rehab when I was 13. A hospital rehab program at a Barberton Citizens Hospital.
So it was more of they didn't know where to put you, so you were doing some time in a rehab.
I was the youngest kid to ever go to that rehab.
Whoa.
So, well, I was in there with 17-year-olds. Everybody
Right.
else is like, and I was 13. But
That's not healthy.
yeah, well, at first it was a son of a bitch, because at first you're getting messed with. I was a small kid back then too, and you got these knuckleheads who are giving you a hard time and making fun of you and whatever else.
Right.
But that within a week or two that passes, because you stick up for yourself or whatever it is, and
They gain respect for you.
yeah,
whatever,
and then after a couple weeks, and by the end, I had tons of respect from the people that were in there, but I went back and forth with drugs and things after that, periodically. It's not like rehab or AA or any of those things. And it really, the issue wasn't really a substance abuse as much as it was just me being angry.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I think what it really stems from was a anger and a hatred of myself. It really,
Sure.
If you feel like you have no self-worth and you're angry at the same time, those are, as an adult, those are some of the most dangerous people you can come across, because they're capable of anything.
Don't care.
Yeah. So, I didn't care, and I didn't see a future, and blah, blah, blah. So that was sort of my teenage years. I dropped out of school in 8th grade. I went back. I dropped out. Eventually, I did graduate, which is, I guess, sort of the next part of the story involving the school in Colorado.
Right. So for the folks that haven't seen a documentary, Matt ends up discovering a school in Colorado and going out there, and things clicked.
Yeah, so Honda, the motor company, they paid for the entire school, and they pay for everybody there. It's sort of strange because they don't brag about it. They don't talk about it. They've spent millions and millions on the school.
Wow.
And they don't even talk about it, which makes it more genuine, I think. But,
sure.
yeah, it's a small school in the mountains of Colorado, beautiful place, the Rocky Mountains. Everybody's on a full scholarship, so I was like $35,000 a year, roughly, at the time. Scholarship, a lot of at-risk youth, At the time I graduated, only 16% of the students graduated and went to the school. It was a difficult school. It was easy to get kicked out. You had to run up mountains in the morning. It was very strict. And it was a challenging curriculum. So just graduating was like some big. Now, that said, it sounds horrible when you say 16% graduation rate.
Right.
A lot of the people who went to the school who didn't graduate, you still had a big effect on their life and helped them in a positive direction.
And you know, you're sending at risk to begin with.
Right.
So, you
Yeah.
know,
I mean,
it's not going to be 100% no matter what.
A lot of inner city kids, a lot of bad backgrounds, a lot of tough situations, a lot of bad families, all that sort of stuff.
Sure.
And, you know, in many ways, worse off. Like I grew up, most of my friends growing up had it. Almost none of them had a father in their life. You know, I'm like one of the only people who had a father, you know, so I can't complain too much.
Yeah.
Because you know, even though we had the cult thing, I was still, and my dad made decent money. I mean, we weren't rich, but we were middle class.
Sure.
Where a lot of my friends were lower, you know, lived in you know, sort of the project type scenario. So, you know, I'm certainly not trying to complain. But anyways, I go to the school in Colorado. I'm there for 3 years. You live at the school. You're there for 3 months. You leave for a month. You're there for 3 months. It's called trimesters as opposed to
Sure.
The school is called Eagle Rock School in Colorado. And there's only 80-some students when I was there. You know, it's not a big school. And it's very hands-on. Basically, I hated school, and you know, I hated school since first grade. You know, I always hated it. Part of it was I didn't fit in very well with the other kids, and I always felt like an outcast. And there's always pressures in that way. Part of it was I hated sitting still in the classroom.
Right.
But when I went to Eagle Rock in Colorado for the first time in my life, I learned that I love to learn. That it wasn't, you know, it wasn't what I hated about school, wasn't the education.
Right.
It was the environment, really. And maybe part of it was, too, that I put myself at this. My parents didn't put me in the school. No parents can put you in the school. You have to want to go there. It's up to the individual, you know, teenager or whatever to get into this school. And so part of it was, in some ways, I wasn't being forced, because I'm stubborn, you know. I wasn't being forced to go to public school like you normally are.
Right.
I sort of volunteering, I guess, or whatever. I was putting myself in this situation. So my own stubborn weirdness, maybe that helped a bit, because I like to sort of carve my own path and feel like I'm in, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear you there. And you made me think of the experience in third grade that I had. So I always tested above. I always did great. And in third grade, a friend inspired me. He was writing little short stories, and he kind of dared me to write a short story. So I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then he would write one, and then I would write one, and then I kept writing. So somewhere in the middle or towards the end of third grade, the principal and teacher called me into the office and had my mom come in, and they decided right then and there in third grade I was going to be a writer.
Wow.
So they started sending me after school and getting me special books and and it became unfun, and I hated it.
Mm.
And now at not third grade, I'm kind of discovering I like to create. I like to jot things down. I like, and I keep looking at it, going, you know, you got an outline there. Why don't you just write the damn book?
Yeah.
Part of my creative outlet is this darn podcast. I'm enjoying it so much. I'll say I love it. I love doing it. I'm meeting tons of people like yourself. I call up, I discover I have a little bit of a knack for it, and I just enjoy it. So it's taken me a lot longer. I didn't have Eagle Rock, and I've taken jobs, and I've done pretty well in them. But, you know, the thought of sitting in a cube or putting on a suit jacket now just makes me cringe.
You know, I'm really happy there are people out there that can work in those environments, the cubicle kind of thing, because I couldn't. If the whole world was like me, it'd be a crazy world, right? You know,
Great point.
Yeah, but so
you.
I'm thankful they exist. But so I went to the school and I graduated. You know, eventually after 3 years. When I was there, I got a scholarship to build a library in Thailand, and that sort of fueled the first. I ended up starting this big scholarship program. Sent next 3 more students every year to Thailand through a different program. And then the last kid screwed it up. He just acted like an asshole and totally killed the program. But, you know, whatever.
Right.
But I made 3 goals when I graduated from Eagle Rock, which I've basically spent the rest of my life up to this point and the rest of my life, period, accomplishing or trying to accomplish. So the 3 goals were, the first was to ride a bicycle alone through Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand, which I did in 2002. The second was to sail alone across the Atlantic, which I did twice and then went around the Americas. It sort of spilled into that around the Americas. And the third was to start a nonprofit organization, which I did 6 years ago. And that's the goal that never ends. Starting a nonprofit,
Right.
starting is the easy part. It's funding it and everything else. It's hard.
So hold on a second. Let's back up. Let's back up to those 3 goals. So number 1, you rode a bike. Was it a mountain bike? Was it?
Yeah, it was a piece. So it was a piece of junk. But when I was going to the school in Colorado, there was this program where bikes that were damaged like Schwinn bicycles that were damaged in the factory were sent to me basically, and I would fix them, and then they would give the bike. They would donate it to an Indian reservation in Wyoming.
Okay.
I don't remember. I never even knew what tribe it was or anything.
Right.
But whatever. I'm just fixing it. And if you build 20 or you fix 20, they give you a free bike. And it was a piece of junk Walmart special Schwinn. It's like $100 bike. But whatever. I had this bike, and I wanted to go back to Southeast Asia because when I was building the library, I was sort of in a bubble. And it was a bubble that I had to create myself because I had to represent the school. I had to be on very good behavior. And I'm not saying I wanted to go crazy there, but I want to be able to drink adrenaline whiskey with Grandpa and, all that all that fun stuff you do in Thailand, and I couldn't because, I was representing the school. So I had the bike, and I was going to go back. So I was like, well, why don't I just bike it? And it's not that I had to do it alone. I would have been okay going with someone else. I just didn't know anybody else who had any interest in biking Southeast Asia. So
how long did that take you?
I spent 100 days, mostly in Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia. Thailand felt like Canada after coming out of Cambodia. Like you got these horrible roads, and now the roads are paved. I don't know. It's just Cambodia was is like the Wild West. Now it's changed a little bit since 2002. They've got rid of a lot more of the landmines because there was still like 8 million landmines there when I was there. Ooh. The main highways were dirt roads.
Right.
But anyways, I did about 500 miles in Laos, 500 miles Vietnam, 500 miles Cambodia, and then a couple hundred miles in Thailand.
Were you camping all the time, or did you get rooms once in a while?
I would stay in local guest houses. They're like $1.
Oh yeah,
like
a hostel.
But the hostel not for tourists, like the local hostels.
Right.
And also sometimes I had to sleep in the jungle. There were times, like I was in the Hmong, it sounds like Hmong if you look at it, but they pronounce it Hmong, guerrilla territory in Laos. I couldn't find they wouldn't let me stay in the villages. They're little mud hut villages.
Right.
But I would sleep in the rice fields in these elevated bamboo things about 4 foot by 4 foot that they use for, like, I don't know, when they're planting rice, somewhere they can sit or something.
So when you see the show Naked and Afraid, you just kind of giggle.
Yeah, well, I haven't watched TV in years, so I've heard of it.
Don't.
Yeah.
I got rid of cable a long time ago.
But so it was a crazy trip. A lot of things happened. A lot of crazy stories came out of that one. And, I don't really bike that much. I'm not really a mountain biker. I haven't really done much since the trip. I grew up on bicycles. I grew up on BMX bicycles.
Right.
So when I was a kid in the 1980s, I don't know what kids do today. I don't see them doing it much. But when I was a kid, everybody had their little Huffy or little piece of junk, BMX bikes. Yep. And you go ride. And that was like the greatest thing ever. You go riding all over town. And I never wore a helmet. Nobody ever did. Nope. Parents never asked much of anything about what are you doing. You just went off and there you go.
Street lights come on, try to be home.
Yeah. But, I had a mountain bike at one point when I was a kid. It got stolen pretty quick. I never got another one. So, it was more about, I guess, the adventure than it was about the bike in particular. I just thought the bike was a good mode of transport. Most people don't have cars in Southeast Asia because they don't have the money. Everybody has bikes. Right. So you're out there with the people, and you go through the village. You're going so slow. Like, you're there with the people. It's not like a motorcycle or like a car where you're...
Great point.
Yeah, so... And at times, I'd be so worn out that, the people are walking the same speed I am. Because I'm just... you're like going up some long hill or something. And,
sure.
So, yeah, not to get on that one forever. We could do a whole podcast just about that.
We'll come back and do that one again.
Yeah,
so,
right. That's fine. But I did that.
All right, you did that.
The trip was over. Now it's time to start the next one, which is the sail across the ocean. Again, I didn't have to do it alone, but, we'll see why that. We'll get to that in a second. But a boat is a lot more expensive than a bicycle.
Yep.
All right, so there's obstacle one. Obstacle two is we grew up biking. I didn't grow up sailing. Nobody in my family sailed. I'm the only person to ever own a sailboat, and I didn't start till I was 24. So I had to learning the aspects of sailing. Obviously, there's challenges and navigation and heavy weather, storms, all that sort of stuff. But what I think is sort of underappreciated is that a lot of the aspects of sailing really isn't that complicated. But the systems on a boat are. So you have to learn wiring, plumbing. You know, you have to understand all these different systems, and it can be more or less complicated depending on the boat.
Right.
But so it was this combination, and I didn't have any money, so I bought piece of junk boats that everything was broken, and so I learned how to fix boats, not because I wanted to. I mean, believe me, if I had the money, I would have bought a turnkey boat, but I would have been worse off because of it. You know,
Right.
it's because I was half broke. I had to. I've learned a lot about fixing marine diesel engines the same way, because I've had crappy engines because I haven't had money to buy. So you just work on them. And,
Great point. So you've got this boat, or you get your
I
first
got
boat.
the first boat. I didn't know what I was doing. A little 25-foot 1969 Coronado, which is like the epitome of a plastic fantastic production boat. You know, just nothing. No, it was built in Hollywood, California, believe it or not. And yeah, I got it in Maryland. I was in Columbus, Ohio. I bought it sight unseen. You never buy a boat without looking at it. You don't buy a car without looking at it. Yeah, so I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I drove it out with I had this old Cadillac Fleetwood, like an 88, brown Fleetwood Cadillac. And I drove it out with my girlfriend from Columbus to Maryland. We never even been to Maryland. I've never even seen a Chesapeake Bay. It was on the Eastern Shore. I sell the thing for next. I mean, I basically gave away the Cadillac for a couple $100 just to.
Sure.
And we jumped in it. She didn't know anything about sailing either. And off we went. And I ran aground the first night. I almost lost my boat and the squall that came through in the nighttime. I had no idea. We had one chart of the entire Chesapeake Bay that was laminated. It looked like a placemat at a bad seafood restaurant.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to, I mean, it was a joke. And but the Chesapeake Bay is rather forgiving. It's mud. It's not rock for the most part. So if you hit the bottom, you don't damage yourself too bad. There's a lot of places to run and hide, a lot of little rivers and creeks and things you can get in and anchor if you have to. And so, and it just took a while, and I learned, and I'm not always the fastest learner, and sometimes I've got to hit my head on the wall 5 times before I realize it hurts. I learned the hard way a lot, but eventually I got the boat down to the Florida Keys. From Maryland. And
how long did that take you think?
Months. It took probably 2.5, 3 months. Going down the ICW a lot, Intercoastal Waterway, sort of slowly working our way down. And everybody's going north. We're going south. We're going south towards the hurricane season, basically, and everybody else is going north. But
so
again,
I've been doing a lot of studying on sailing and boating in the last 10 years, and I'm assuming you did none of that. You just had a boat, and you didn't really know about seasons, and you just kind of went. And
yeah, from Ohio, what do we know about hurricanes?
I'm from Michigan originally.
Yeah, it's like tornadoes happen once in a while, but and I did try to take some stuff. I took a brief course at one point. I did some stuff when I was 16 on a sailboat, on a boat with no engine. You had to row the thing up in Maine.
Okay.
And for a little while, but I didn't really remember anything from that. Besides the fact I rowed a bunch and had to sleep on the oars at night, which is about as comfortable as it sounds. But, and that did whet my appetite a bit, I guess, but I don't know. There was none of that information transferred. And then I tried to take like some refresher courses stuff beforehand, but the teacher was horrible. He hated me too. I mean, he just gave me shit all the time, and it's some older guy. And, I came out of that. I didn't really know, really didn't know much still. And really, ultimately, the only way to really learn how to sail is to get on a boat and go sailing. I mean,
agreed.
You can't learn seamanship from a book or a movie or a podcast or a seminar or any of that stuff. You can only really learn it by going out and experience. It's like anything, right? I mean, you want to learn to drive, you got to drive a car.
Yep.
So, I got better, and I lost my boat in the hurricanes. So I was down there 2004. Florida got hit by 4 hurricanes, Charlie, Francis, Gene, and Ivan. I got Charlie, Francis, and Gene. Ivan hit Pensacola, but I got the other 3. And it was a 3-punch knockout. I lost the boat. I was on anchor for them. Eventually, the boat drug anchor. Basically, the boat was, wound up way up in the swamps. I was able to get it back in the water. And it was still floating, but it was so bad.
Right.
And I sold it to a guy, and I feel real bad about it later, but I sold it to a guy who was living out of his car, who was kind of doing like construction work, and he was new to the area. I guess it should have been a warning sign. Like, not just that he ripped me off, like he never paid me all the money, but he ended up it was in St. Augustine, where they used to have a big liveaboard anchorage. Now it's all mooring balls, because that's what they do.
Yeah.
But back then they had a big, healthy liveaboard that was permanent, semi-permanent. He ended up being the scourge of the anchorage, on my old boat. And I used to live on that boat in St. Augustine in the same anchorage. So I would come back and visit a couple times. I'd be like, oh, my God.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. At one point, he was in jail, and a boat was sitting there. And I don't know. It was just God knows what happened to the guy. Nothing good, I'm sure. He was just such a...
Let's hope he turned it around.
Yeah. So I ended up getting a 26 Pearson, a little bit of a better boat. I wanted to cross the Atlantic on it. I was getting it ready, put a wind vane on it, put a lot of equipment, getting it ready, new sails, all that stuff. And I just, you work on a boat, you can't stand up without hitting your head. It's too small inside.
26, yeah.
Yeah, so, and when you're working on a boat like that, it hurts my back. Every day at the end of because I'm all crouched over. And it's like, I just need a boat I can stand up in. So I was able to get a 32-foot boat that was hurricane dammed. The one hurricane that didn't hit me, Ivan, hit that boat. So it had been wrecked in the other hurricane. And I saw this boat, this 32-foot Pearson, 323 Pearson. I thought it was a screaming deal. And I get the boat and everything. I didn't know much then either. I didn't do a survey I didn't know anything. And everything needed replaced. So I ended up replacing the engine, the sails, the rigging, electronics, plumbing, wiring, head, you name it. I replaced it.
So to interrupt you for a second, for the folks out there that aren't boaters, you may put a down payment on a boat sight unseen, but you don't actually buy it until you have a survey, you take it out of the water, you test it in the water, you do all these things to triple check that you get a seaworthy vessel, or at least get your money's worth. And to buy a boat unseen, because think about it, you got how many tons of metal and steel and wood that are out there bouncing around. You want to make sure they're sturdy. So
well, it's a big investment,
and
it's
also
also
a big investment.
and it's a depreciating value on top of that. You're not going to make money.
You get it.
Yeah, you're not going to. So there is an art to buying boats. And by the way, I am also a yacht broker now at Eastport Yacht Sales, which you can see over there.
Hey, great.
But hold of me at matt@eastportyachtSales.com if you are interested in buying a boat or selling your boat. I'll be happy to help. But
there you go. And we're in Annapolis, but you'll
I'm in
up and down the East
Annapolis,
Coast,
exactly. And Annapolis is a great place because this is the sailboat capital of the country, and there's a million boats for sale. So you can come here and look at 5 different boats in a day in most places aren't like that.
We'll talk after the podcast.
Yeah, but so the whole survey thing, I just didn't know much, and I was just sort of going pushing forward. But I got a boat I could stand up in. I sailed it alone across the Atlantic. So basically, I bought that boat down in Pensacola. I brought it across the Gulf of Mexico.
And that's your second time across the Atlantic now.
Well, no, this is my. I hadn't done any of that yet.
Oh, I thought you did it in the 26-foot. Okay.
No, that 20. I was preparing it for that.
Oh, got
And
you.
then I got tired because my back was hurting all the time, and I was just like, and I saw this opportunity and sold everything, and I just sort of hustled together and got the money I needed and got the boat.
Got you.
So I took it across the Gulf of Mexico in a gale. I didn't even check the weather before I left, like an idiot. I mean, Jesus Christ. I mean, I sort of checked it. I mean, I knew there wasn't like a crazy storm, but it was like in the spring. And and I didn't really. I had a wind vane at the time, which is a self-steering gear. It's like an autopilot, doesn't take power. It's like learning a musical instrument, and I hadn't quite worked it out yet. But anyways, we got across, and me and my girlfriend, who never sailed either, went to the Bahamas from there, and my engine broke. And my engine broke in a very remote place, surrounded by reefs and strong currents. We were stuck there for weeks. Eventually, I found a mechanic that just happened to anchor next to me, and who had some tools. And I traded him like everything, a winch, an inverter. I just traded him everything I could, and he opened up my engine, and we got it going long enough to get me back to land. But
wow,
and then eventually I got the boat up to Annapolis. I went through a Hurricane Katrina on that boat a couple days after I bought it, like 24 hours after I bought it, which is another story, I guess.
You're a hurricane magnet.
No, I know, right? Well, that's why I went north. But I buy this damn thing, and at the time, Hurricane Katrina's like going through Miami. And they're projecting that it's going to go further west, I don't know, over to like, Texas or maybe Louisiana or something. And so I buy the boat, and I own the boat, and I didn't get insurance or anything ahead of time.
Of course not.
And nobody would insure you with a hurricane coming in 24 hours. It changed course. It was coming right at us. Luckily, it did go a little further west to Biloxi, Mississippi. Got hit. I mean, not lucky for them, but for me. And I rode it out the best I could, and docks went underwater. And I didn't, some boats got damaged around, but I put 16 lines out to 6 pilings, and I just kept. But anyways, that was like, this is enough, and that was my 4th hurricane in like a couple of years because that was 2005. So I was thinking, 4 hurricanes in 2 years. So I was like, I gotta get the hell out of here. So I went back I went to Virginia. I didn't really know where I was going, to be honest. I went back to the Chesapeake Bay only because I bought my first boat there. I didn't have any ties there. I had no family there. I had no job waiting for me. I had no other real reason. But I came in, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And some guy, I happened to be at a dock for a couple months, and some guys, I was going to go to the Annapolis Boat Show.
Sure.
And the guy said, well, hey, I got a slip in Annapolis, just talking and bullshitting to a random guy at the dock. Why don't you, when you check out the slip, and if you like it, you can rent my slip, move up there.
Okay.
So I'll go up to the boat show, like the slip. Okay, let's move to Annapolis. So, me and my girlfriend motor up the bay, and in November of 2005, and then it took a few years, a couple. I arrived in November 2005. I didn't cross the Atlantic on that boat till 2008, the summer, like July actually of 2008.
Okay.
All that in between period of time was just me working my ass off so I can buy the equipment and refit the boat. Getting sails and getting the engine and learning how I worked as a sailmaker. I did worked as a rigger. I did a lot of different random jobs in the boat industry, not because I want to be a sailmaker. I don't get along with a sewing machine.
Right.
I suck with a sewing machine.
Sure.
But I just wanted to learn, how to build them and blah, blah, blah. So
kind of preparing you for
Yep.
what's coming here.
Yep.
And were you doing that consciously? Or?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to become as knowledgeable as I could about, all the different aspects of sailing, and a lot of that involves equipment. So,
Very
and
true.
it's come in handy, like being the time I only spent 6 months as a sailmaker. And I did just the head to tack to clue. I did called handwork mostly, which is the hand sewing,
Okay.
and head to tack to clue, reef points, that sort of stuff. But, I did some swedging things and some stuff in the sewing machine. But that knowledge of how to properly hand sew, I can't tell you how many times I've hand stitched a rip in a sail in the middle of the ocean, and I never had to think twice about it because I knew how to do the proper baseball stitch is what you want to do, which is this
Okay, good to
particular-
know.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
no, it looks like a
seriously.
baseball, at the end.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so yeah, I did everything I could to prep myself. Basically, when I make a goal, I base my whole life around that goal. So, if crossing the Atlantic is the goal, then everything rotates around that.
Right. Your work, your
Yep.
personal life, your everything,
Yep.
clothing you buy, not buy. No, I get it.
Yeah,
I get it.
and that was, and like we were saying earlier before we turn this on, at some point you just gotta untie the boat and leave. All right.
Yep.
I know plenty of people that have talked a lot about doing big ocean passages, and they never go anywhere because the list isn't complete and la 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 la.
Right.
Yeah, not everything was necessarily ready, and I had $2,000 or $1,500 to my name, which is not enough money to do the trip. I knew I was going to run out of money, but at some point you just got to go. So I left,
Right.
and I was heading towards. I wanted to get to Iceland originally, and
Okay, so you're leaving from here and you're going.
I'm leaving
north.
from
Okay.
the Chesapeake Bay. Trying to remember if I went out the Chesapeake or the Delaware. I think I went out the Chesapeake, and this hurricane started coming up behind me called Bertha. And I thought, oh, shit, Big Bertha? Like, I ain't messing with that thing. So I duck into Kittery, Maine, which is it's at the very south part of Maine, where Maine and New Hampshire border.
Okay.
Randomly, I had an uncle there that's some kind of or a cousin. No, it was a cousin there. And I never even knew it existed. Mom's like, oh, check him out. He was a really older guy. He's passed away by now, but he made his own beef jerky. So he gave me
Okay.
like a huge amount of beef jerky, which ended up working out well for me.
Nice.
And he did it again for my trip around the Americas.
Oh.
Of course, it doesn't last me long because I have no discipline with beef jerky. I just eat it all. But so I leave out of Kittery, Maine, right behind Bertha, thinking that if I leave after this storm, maybe I can get across before another hurricane or tropical storm. And I get out a little ways, 3, 4, 5 days maybe, and then Tropical Storm Cristobal hits me. And it was a big, powerful storm. It blew me really far. I ended up going way far south. It blew me pretty far off course. It was blowing 60 knots at times. Another single-handed sailor got rescued near me. I didn't know it at the time, and my dad heard about it, and he thought it was me.
Holy
So he was
cow.
like freaking out, calling the Coast Guard and
my
all the
gosh.
rest. And yeah, it was a pretty bad. So I learned it was the first time I used a drogue, which is something for heavy weather.
Yep.
I learned a bit about some heavy weather tactics, I guess. I mean, that's how you do baptism by fire. The only bad thing really is that I got my ass kicked by a storm named Cristobal. I mean, it sounds like a French figure skater or something, you know? Could have been Chuck or Charlie or something. Man. Freaking Cristobal.
Toughen it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Damn. Oh, that's funny. So the drogue, for people that don't sail, a drogue is something you tow behind your boat, and it kind of creates what they call a sea anchor.
Yeah, it's different. A sea anchor goes off the bow, but it's just very confusing, and a lot of people, like if you look in bow ditch, like the Webster's Dictionary of sailing terminology, it will say that a drogue is a sea anchor. But a sea anchor is actually a large parachute you put off your bow.
Right.
And a drogue is like a small one you put off your stern. And the idea of a drogue is it's slowing you down.
Correct.
And the idea of the parachute sea anchor is it's almost stopping you. And if it's off the bow, that means the front end.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
The front end of your boat takes the waves.
Right.
As opposed to the back end.
And a drogue, in other words, and what I had learned is slows you down a little bit, so you're not diving down the waves, and that's what it is for people that aren't sailors out there.
Yeah.
So,
and there's a Jordan series drogue which slows you down more and all this other stuff.
My real question was, you had never used a drogue, right?
Right.
So was this something you had on your boat that somebody told you to take, and then you read in the book how to hook it up, or you just tied it up and threw it on there and experimented with length and everything else?
When I started sailing, I was devouring all the information I could get.
Okay.
And one of the books I read is a book that's been long unpublished or whatever. They, for some reason, I guess you can find it on the internet now, but it's called the Drag Device Database, the DDDB.
Okay.
And this was a book where every chapter was a story from somebody who had a storm in the ocean, and they used a drag device, a drogue or a parachute sea anchor.
Okay.
And at the end, they had a little bit about what I did right, what I did wrong, what I'll do next time. So I read all these stories, and I'm like, wow, these things are great.
Case studies.
Yeah. And
wow.
So I knew I wanted to get a drogue and a parachute sea anchor before I left. And, once you got them, you're a little curious to try them too, I guess.
Sure.
But the wind was picking up. I was doing something called forereaching, which I actually had to sort of go into the wind, trying to get away from the heart of this storm. And I was coming off these waves, even with minimal sail. I was flying off, and I was pounding on the next wave. It feels like somebody, like you have a giant with a sledgehammer just pounding on your keel. And so I put out the drogue. I thought I could do something here. Put out the drogue, and it made all the difference in the world. And I did that the rest of the storm, and I didn't have any damage from that. And yeah, it worked out great. Now, I had to use it again I had a lot of bad weather on that trip. I had another storm that was even worse than that one. It didn't have a name, but it had 30-foot seas. It blew 50 knots for 70 hours.
We'll call that one Lisa.
Yeah, right, Lisa. Got to get some real feminine names. Lisa, I don't know. Better than like a male feminine name,
I guess. I don't even know where to go.
But
there.
I don't need. But anyways, I had, I think, 6 or 7 gales. It was just the way it works is there's a high pressure system, I guess, sort of by Iceland, and it was further south, which means the lows that kind of cross the ocean, hitting like Scotland and whatnot in the summer, or by Greenland, cross to Scotland, they were further south.
And you didn't have any real electronic predictable type tools?
No, I had a little bit. I didn't. Satellite communication has gone a long way since 2008, and I didn't have much money either, which limits it. But I had a single sideband that I installed, which is like a ham radio. But because of the size of my boat, you can only have so much muscle. You need to have so much gridding below the copper straps below the waterline. So basically, I can only talk so far. So for the first half of the transatlantic, I was able to talk to this guy named Herb, who no longer does it. He was in his 80s, and he did, like, for free, he did, like, weather forecasting, weather routing sort of stuff.
Nice.
And and he would spank people. The funny thing is he was a German expat, and he was kind of grouchy, and he would, like, if people would try to lie to him, he would catch them in the lie, and he would, like, spank them basically on air.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, it was like that was the entertainment. It was like every day you check in, it's like, who's he going to get today? Sometimes it was me, but you never know.
Well, I mean, he's giving it to you for free. You're just going to take it, aren't you?
Right. So, so made it across the Atlantic. It took 34 days for me to get across the Atlantic the first time.
Not too bad.
It was about 3,400 miles, so I did about 100 miles a day, and that's because I had to zigzag all over the place avoiding storms. I sailed up into West Ireland and, sort of did a Ring of Kerry by boat and spent some time. I was really trying to get, like I said, I was trying to get to Iceland originally, and I wound up in England originally. And after that tropical storm, Chris, I left late. I left in July, and it was late in the season anyways. And I thought, I just sort of did the numbers after the storm, and I was pretty far south by that point. And I was like, I could get to Iceland, but I'm never going to get back before it's too late in the season. Or I could get there and spend 3 days there and leave. You know, I didn't have enough time to really check it out.
Right.
So I just aimed towards Europe. I didn't even know where the hell I was going until the last couple of days. I just sort of pointed the boat that way. Like, well, maybe I'll go to France, Ireland, England. I don't know. I'm just going to go that way. And
it all sounds cool.
Yeah, and I wound up in Falmouth, England, because it has a large harbor. It's easy to get into if you've never been in there. And then I got charts for Ireland because I didn't have any, and went up and did Ireland, came back to England, and bounced the English Channel over towards France and Belgium, and I ended up in the North Sea in some really crappy weather, and it was November, and it was cold, and it was sleeting, and it was almost icy, and I'm like, and I hadn't slept in 36 hours, and I'm like, what in the hell am I doing? So I had heard these rumors of this place called Sixhaven, this marina that's supposed to be super cheap, and it was in Amsterdam, and I found it, and it was like I didn't know if it existed or anything, but it did, and it was cheap. And so I go in there, they say 500 and some euro. I'm like, what, a month? They're like, no, for the winter. I'm like, all right, great, because that's all the money I got left.
I know where I'm staying.
Yeah, so I gave them basically every dollar I had. I got a plane ticket to go back to the States. Had to work off the plane ticket because I didn't have the money for that. Right. And I worked as an Alfa Romeo mechanic in an Alfa Romeo junkyard doing old Spiders, which I'm an okay mechanic. The thing is, those cars have no electronics, so it makes it easier, I guess.
Great point.
But working on an Alfa is not really like any other car either. The Germans make cars sort of like machine-like and mechanical. The Italians make cars like they're making love. I mean, you gotta.
Good point.
You gotta. Yeah.
Hey, and I'm not rushing you at all because I can go all day. It's 3:45. You said.
All right. Yeah. We
got
it. So, anyways, we'll hop through this story.
And I will go as long as you want. I mean, if you gotta go, you gotta go.
Yeah, I've got to get to
I could come back in the morning too. So
I
end up staying tonight. But.
Well, the long and short is I kept the boat in Amsterdam. I flew back to the States, worked as an Alfa mechanic, built some money, came back in the spring, worked my way down to Spain and Portugal, Morocco. The highlight was really West Africa. I went down to Senegal and Gambia. I went a couple 100 miles up the Gambia River into the jungle. There's, sailing past hippos and gorilla.
Wow.
There's freaking baboons and whatnot. But
how cool!
Yeah, and then I sailed back to the Caribbean. I had like 20 some bucks when I sailed back, so I had nothing left, and I had to get a job. And so I worked in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where you can work without a visa. And so I just did crap work, bottom of the barrel stuff. And then in the spring, I sailed back to Annapolis. I didn't really know what to do with myself at that time. I didn't do this sailing trip to necessarily progress myself as in my career as a sailor. Right. But at the same time, when I got back, I realized too that it didn't really mean anything. Like it means something to do that trip like that.
Sure.
It's all, but at the same time, it's not going to not going to really help you get a job.
Yeah.
Even in a sailing town.
Yeah, but it helps your soul.
Yeah, there's a lot of other great things that come out of it. And the whole trip around the Americas never would have happened if it wasn't for this. So I'm back in Annapolis, and I have a little bit of money saved up, and I didn't feel like getting a job in a boatyard or as a sailmaker or whatever else again. So I started doing volunteer work for this organization, CRAB. CRAB is Chesapeake Regional Accessible Boating. They help people with mental and physical disabilities go sailing. And I'm doing full-time volunteer until I get broke, and then I'll get a job.
Okay.
So I was painting the bottom of this boat one day, and the founder, who's a guy, Don Backey, he's in a wheelchair, quadriplegic guy, car accident, hurt his spine. And I say, hey, Don, why don't you let me take this boat up to the Arctic, and we'll try to raise some money for crab. And I was serious. I thought maybe you think I'm joking or something. But he's like, okay, let's do it. I always wanted to. My heroes were the great explorers for a long time, going way back. Sure. Shackleton, Amundsen, Scott to a lesser degree. But there's a lot of great, Perry. There's a lot of great explorers out there, and those are sort of my heroes. And when I got into sailing, I gravitated very quickly towards the pioneers of long-distance single-handed sailing, Bernard Moitessier, Robin Knox-Johnson. Robin Knox-Johnson's the first guy to ever sail alone around the world without stopping in 1968. But so it made sense for me to sort of anyways, before I get to that, Don, we agreed to do this trip, and we get up. This boat didn't have an engine. Somebody else sort of donated this Alban Vega, which is a 27-foot boat. Okay. They traded. We gave them a boat. They gave us the Alban Vega. So it was like a boat swap. They got a very clean, brand new Catalina 22. So I got this boat. It's a little better boat. And, I would like to get the boat back to Annapolis. And after it started with just the Northwest Passage in the Arctic. And it's like, well, if I why don't I keep going? Just go around the Americas. And then we looked at
So it started with conversation of... of the Northwest Passage, or
Yeah.
you were actually in there
No.
on your way?
No.
Okay.
I was sitting in Annapolis painting the bottom of a boat.
Gotcha.
And I wanted to go up to the Arctic for some time. I mean, years. I've been looking at it and researching it. You know, sailing through the Northwest Passage is like, if Cape Horn is the Mount Everest to sail in, then this is K2.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
And so it's, you know, so I've been... So it really just started with this, and it's kind of like the biking through Southeast Asia thing. It just started with me going there, and it expanded. We just going back to Thailand, you know, and so this idea expanded into going around the Americas, and I thought about it more, and I thought, well, you know, nobody's actually pulled off sailing around the Americas nonstop, single-handed, you know, without stopping all that. So okay, well, I'll give it a try.
So all right, so I got questions there.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so how do you know no one has sailed around nonstop, single-handed? It sounds
That's a
like
good question.
it sounds like in the documentary that you go, well, I'll just go around, and then you start researching and find out nobody'd ever done it.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean,
At least
at
it
first it
felt
was
that
going
way.
around. At first it wasn't necessarily having to be nonstop. So I was thinking about sailing around the Americas, and then it moved on to nonstop. The way that you know, and the reason why it's simple in this case, and I had to go through this with Guinness Book of Records too,
Okay,
because
right.
in order, because I was, you know, to get that record. Not that they called me, I didn't call them, by the way. Like a year and a half after I got back, I got a call from Guinness, which surprised the hell out of me.
Wow, cool.
You know, freaking on the phone, some dude in England. He's like,
yeah.
yeah, but the Northwest Passage, not many people have gone through the Northwest Passage.
Correct.
Every single person that does is recorded by the Polar Scott Institute at the University of Cambridge in England.
Okay.
Every boat.
Got you.
Only one other person had sailed through the Northwest Passage nonstop, single-handed, and he sailed to New Zealand. So there's only one other person that, you know, so it makes it real easy to break down.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that
So-
narrows it down right there.
Yeah, so and I, of course, didn't go stop. And what this means, just to make sense of it, I left on a boat out of the Chesapeake Bay. I sailed north between Canada and Greenland. I turned left, sailing through the Northwest Passage, around the state of Alaska, down the Pacific, around Cape Horn, the bottom of South America, and back up the Atlantic to the Chesapeake Bay. It is just that simple, folks.
How many miles?
It was 27,077 miles.
Holy shit.
And I was alone in the ocean for 309 days on this little tiny 27-foot boat, which I couldn't stand up in, by the way, which kind of
You're back
defeats-
to that. Yeah, you're sore
Yeah.
back. You know, it's funny is, you know, I've been boating for a long time, powerboat, and we had a houseboat on Lake Powell. Fantastic. 15 years ago, I'm guessing, I did some work for my brother where he got a contract because I came and spoke on his behalf and put my name and my resume on his work, and he got this big contract. Called me up at Christmas and said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, we," and he goes, "No, not we. What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I want to learn to sail." So 15 years ago or so, he got me a sailing package, and I got my inbound waterway certification,
Oh.
and I've been hooked since. I've been to this show twice. I've been to the Miami show. I've been on all kinds on the West Coast.
Let me know when you want to buy a boat.
Well, after the podcast, we'll talk, because I've
Yeah.
actually had some discussions with the wife. My 2 children are now 18 and 20 and out of the house, and we're like, well, all this house is doing is holding our junk.
Sure.
So
Yeah,
why don't we get rid of our junk and get into something smaller? And she's about convinced. So
Yeah, well, hey, man,
maybe
if you're sailing to the Bahamas and the Caribbean, it's pretty easy to convince
Maybe.
a lady to come with you.
well, what scares her? She has no problem being on a boat.
Mm-hmm.
She knows me, and I've got a lot of the same characteristics that you do. And I would say, okay, we're going to Hawaii, and we're in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
Big ocean crossings scare the hell out of her. Now, I'm not saying they don't scare the hell out of me too,
Mm-hmm.
but it excites me a lot more than it scares me, or both. I don't know.
Sure,
But,
sure. And you got to, if you're not scared at some level, you're crazy. I mean, there's got to be, but then again, there's different mentalities, which like I had to have kind of a bit different mentality for the trip around the Americas. But yeah, generally speaking, a lot of people are afraid of the open ocean. It makes total sense. We don't
Sure.
belong out there.
Right.
We don't swim really for shit. I mean, compared to anything in the ocean, we
Right.
can't breathe in the water. And you've been on the hanging out in the waves in the beach, and I've been hanging out in the waves in the beach, and a wave just hits you a little weird, and you breathe some water in, and you're coughing, and you're just having a hard time treading water.
Right.
You can imagine what it'd be like in the middle of the ocean.
And that
so.
little wave just knocking the crap out of you. We, for our anniversary in September, we took a cruise. on the world's largest cruise ship, which was brand new by Carnival. And we were in that hurricane last September.
Oh, wow.
So we couldn't come back to Florida, and they sent us. It was a 7-day cruise, and it turned into almost a 12-day cruise because we stayed out in the Western Caribbean, port hopping until we could go back to Fort Lauderdale. But I remember on the way back, that boat was actually slamming a little bit coming down at night.
Yeah, well, that's amazing for a boat that size.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm not going to say it was, skipping waves, but it was coming down. But you can watch waves, and if you're ever on a boat out in the water, you don't, especially when you watch the videos on YouTube or whatever, they don't look that big.
Yeah.
But you get out in just a couple of feet of water, standing at the ocean, like you're saying, it'll knock your ass right down.
It's extremely difficult to get proper wave pictures or film. It just flattens it out. It's really hard to. It's almost impossible in some ways to really get the. You need like CGI.
Right.
CGI has finally gotten good enough that there's a movie called Adrift that came out about a year or whatever. I mean, you can still get it at Redbox. It's this story about this girl and they get hit by a storm with it's yeah. There's a scene in it where the CGI in the storm, which is probably the best I've ever seen of a representation of like what it's like to be on a boat in a crazy storm.
Okay.
And it's only a few minutes of the movie.
Right.
But movies usually screw it up. So yeah, there's no good way to really capture that sort of the real feel of what it's like to be in 20-foot seas or 30-foot seas or whatever.
Right. Okay, so you're talking about it. You want to do the Northwest Passage. You figure out nobody's been around the Americas nonstop, solo. So you're kind of talking with your gentleman with Crab, and you just start putting forth the effort of finding sponsors.
Yep. We had a talk pretty early on, which is very much a talk I expected. Which is Crab is a small organization. We're happy to help you with name. You can throw our name around in Annapolis, which is a lot. But we don't have any money, and we can't actually support it in any way, and we can't write grants or anything like that for you. So, yeah, it just became me pounding the pavement. When some things work, we wrote 600 letters off. It cost more in postage than we got back from the letters. It was one of our first efforts. I mean, that was pretty bad. And there was times where we had nothing left. Like I had to rebuild parts of the boat with wood I pulled out of dumpsters because we just didn't have the money to buy the wood.
And that's a great metaphor for life. And we talked before we started up the cameras, and I said one of my favorite sayings is, "If you wait for the boat to be perfect, you'll never leave the dock." And man, have you taken that to the nth degree. And I love all the interviews in your documentary from established and expert sailors where it just said he was nuts.
Yeah, well, they can't imagine doing it.
He was more than nuts.
Well, that's the thing, too. If I would have listened to those experts, I never would have done any of this. So at some level, because same with a lot of these. Biking through Southeast Asia, people told me, oh, you can't do it on a Schwinn. And I didn't have panniers on the front, which are like storage things. Oh, you can't do it without those, and all. And sailing across the Atlantic, oh, it's a Pearson, it's a Chevrolet, it's a coastal cruiser, you can't do that. And so it's the same with this trip around the Americas, obviously. So
everybody says don't do the Northwest Passage in a fiberglass boat
well,
either.
There's a lot of, and I had a good ice year for sailing through and a bad ice year for polar bears. Unlike this year was a really bad ice year for sailing through and a great year for polar bears. But it varies up there year to year. If you look at a graph of the ice in the Arctic over the last 25 years, you will see a decline of somewhere around 1/3. Most of that loss is coming above Alaska and Siberia. The ice in the Northwest Passage, because it's an archipelago, it's still year to year. You don't know what you're going to get till you get up there, and it's going to be a while, I think, before that really opens up easily every year.
You think?
Yeah, right now it's like you have 2 bad years, 2 bad ice years, and then you've got 4 or 5 good years to go through, and then you get 2. But that's just looking back over the last 15 years. I mean, that can change easily.
And from what I've read, and of course I'm no expert from what you learned or understand, is a fiberglass boat, if you happen to hit ice underneath the water, can damage your boat more than easily. And they talk about having steel boat only, or now Kevlar reinforced crash boxes. And
they do make Kevlar.
From what I read, but that's not financially
No, yeah.
feasible.
Oyster has it, Hylas has it, these Kevlar reinforced hulls. Yeah, you're looking at $500,000 boats, and that's
Right.
when they're used,
Right.
and older, But no, it wasn't. It wasn't an ideal boat at all. One guy had taken one of these Alban Vegas to Antarctica, wrote a book about it called Berserk. And that's guy, it's a whole long, crazy story with that guy. But, other people, I've done some stuff with it. I felt pretty confident in the boat, and I didn't know what an Alban Vega was when the boat was first donated. I'd asked my friend Simon Edwards, who's been a long-time delivery captain,
Right.
what do you think about this boat? And he's like, oh, they're great. And I felt a lot better right there. But the reality of ice with a fiberglass, especially a relatively light, thin boat like that one, you can't hit ice. I mean, that's it. So you have different types of ice. One is like icebergs and the little bergs that come off the big bergs, and then you have pack ice, which is a totally different monster.
Right.
And so I avoided. I didn't sleep for like 6 weeks. I lost probably 35, 40 pounds. Yeah, mostly from sleep deprivation. I think you burn a lot of calories when you don't sleep. I was 30 years old at the time, so youth definitely helps. You know. But I didn't have huge amounts of pack ice to deal with, and had there been a lot of pack ice, I wouldn't have been able to make it through.
Did you know that going in, or was
Yes.
it a little bit of luck?
I had no idea. I had no idea if I was going to get through the Northwest Passage.
Okay.
I had no clue. And then you don't even this year you don't know. You don't ever know.
Right.
The way it is now. I mean, maybe 50 years from now it'll be different, but at this point you sail up there and it just sort of is what it is when you get there. Maybe it's open, maybe it's not. It's a long way to sail for it to not be open, which happened this year. These guys sailed up who I was with doing some research project on their boat, because I was up in the Northwest Passage this summer trying to get through. And they had to sail all the way back down to Halifax because it didn't open.
Ouch.
And I think a couple 120-foot boats made it through, made of metal. But no regular sized sailboats made it through. A boat got crushed in the ice and sunk, and people almost died.
So an aside, and we're running late on time. I hate to do this.
It's all right. Just
sure?
keep going. We can go to 4:45 or something.
Oh, fantastic. So I golf with a guy who in Utah. When I was up there, I was in a golf tournament, and I just got paired with this guy, and he was in his 50s. He had made some money in investments in tech companies, and he'd been divorced and just got married to a younger lady, and he was just telling me how he thought that was going to go, and he thought he was going to end up having another child in his 50s, and he was kind of freaking out a little bit. Well, he also knew that he was an adventurous type.
Mm-hmm.
And he had a climbing buddy, and they had climbed Denali, I think. And they started talking about first, and it's right around the time I saw your stuff too. And they figured out that nobody had climbed all 7 highest peaks or sailed all 7 seas ever. So they decided they were going to do it together. Neither one of them had sailed at all.
Like sailed to them and climbed them? Is that
Sailed
like
all 7 seas, on all 7 seas,
and
climbed the 7 highest peaks. And they had bagged 3 or 4 of the peaks already, so they go, well, let's see if we can do that before we die.
Mm-hmm.
His buddy died the next year.
Oh, man.
His wife had a child, and their child had disabilities. And he just said, well, you know what? Let's start a something that brings recognition to what my child's going through.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to work. Let me start going for these and see if I can do it in honor of my friend. And he bagged it like 4 years ago or something, and he goes around and he speaks now. His name's Martin Fry.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, so now, he's done all 7 seas and all 7 highest peaks, got Everest, and he goes around and talks to groups about, what it took to climb Everest and everything else, and the extreme challenges. But you talk about losing all that weight and just...
Yeah, it's not a good expedition if you don't lose 20 pounds or so at least. that's sort of been the way that all of our research expeditions after I got back from that trip have gone. And you could also say it's not a good expedition if you don't almost die at least once.
Yeah. And his last sea was the hardest. He was on a racing yacht from Japan across the Northwest somewhere, and he was getting a log, and they were sending messages, and his wife was blogging it, and he was just talking about being seasick. The whole way.
Well, that sucks. Normally, people get better after a few days of being seasick. Usually
Yeah.
people can respond and adjust.
Right.
I'm luckily, I don't have any issues with seasickness. I can feel if it goes from very light to very heavy, which happens sometimes. You go out an inlet and all of a sudden you're in crazy waves. You just on getting knocked around.
Mm-hmm.
I can feel a little something, but the way it makes me feel is hungry. Like it makes me want to eat a bunch of food.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I don't. I have been seasick one time, and I don't know why I got seasick that one time. It's never happened ever again. I puked all over my wind vane. My first time ever going out alone, actually. And I went in and out. It was much bigger seas than I thought in the Gulf Stream with the wind opposing it down in Florida, which is all choppy and nasty. And so I'm glad I was proper seasick, where you're puking your brains out in the whole
Yeah.
night. And I'm really glad I experienced it once because it gives me sympathy for people going through it.
Yeah.
And
Great point.
it's basically like having the world's worst hangover. I mean, it's
Yeah, that's a good way to put it too. You know what I discovered on roller coasters, that if I'm yelling and whooping it up and in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
I don't get queasy at all. But if I sit and try to be real quiet, it gets to me a little bit. So maybe
Yeah.
distracting yourself a little. I don't know.
Yeah, and I might have been
knows?
more nervous than I realized too, because it was my first time trying to do a big ocean trip alone.
Yeah, good point.
And yeah, maybe part of it. I mean, I've seen people get seasick from fear. I've seen that happen before.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Absolutely.
yeah.
Nerves get the best of them.
Yeah. So, anyways, you make it through the Northwest Passage. It took a while. The thing was, I didn't have a heater on the boat.
You didn't?
No. Well, I mean, how are you going to make heat? Are you going to burn propane? A propane
Yeah,
heater?
good
Well,
point.
propane heaters burn a lot of propane. You're going to burn diesel? Well, you got 3,000 miles you got to go.
Right.
And you got about 6 weeks to do it. And or else the ice comes back and you get locked in there. And for me, it was like, what's more important, using the diesel for propulsion to get through the ice or using it for heat and comfort? So I didn't even install a heater because I didn't want to share my propulsion fuel.
Or even be tempted.
Yeah, or even be tempted.
Great point.
So I just wore I wore this Mustang survival suit, this big, giant, like, poofy. It was like a onesie you wear when you're a kid going, in Michigan or Ohio, you go out playing in those onesies.
Yep.
And I lived in it for like, a couple of months, basically, which you can imagine how well it smelled after that. But yeah, it... it was, I was cold and wet and hungry and blah, 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 blah. And
I seem to remember you breaking a bottle of scotch too somewhere around there that you
Well,
weren't very happy about.
no, well, I drank some scotch, and no one wants to lose scotch, but I had every reason to be miserable, and
Sure.
unhappy, but being miserable wasn't going to give me a hot shower and a piece of pizza and a cold beer. Being miserable wasn't going to change anything. So instead, I was like a kid in Disney World. I was loving it. And yeah, I was all these, wet and cold and hungry and blah,
Right.
blah, blah. But I was having a great time with it. And a part of it is the explorers were up there. It's such an epicenter for within the history of exploration.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was walking in their footsteps. So yeah, I really, the whole entire trip around the Americas, I really enjoyed for the most part. I say it was a pleasant and enjoyable experience for the most part.
Can I ask you a question? All right, you're from Ohio, I'm from Michigan, and I've just talked about this in a podcast last week with a captain who now does art, and he was talking about being in the moment. Here's the example, and I've had many of them. So I moved to Utah for a while. My wife's from Utah,
Mm-hmm.
and her cousin took me rock climbing.
Southern Utah?
Salt Lake area.
Okay.
So actually, she's from Carson, Canada, and they moved down. They migrated to Utah years ago. But he took me rock climbing, and we went rock climbing with ropes and everything else. I'd been bouldering and everything. I'd lived out west. I moved to Reno in 90, 91-ish,
Mm-hmm.
and had done a ton of free climbing, but nothing extreme. So he took me. I found myself crossing a rope bridge across a raging river, going to climb some pretty big, and we're carrying bags and ropes and carabiners and everything else, going to do real climbing. And I caught myself in the middle of that rope bridge after he'd already passed, and I just stopped, and I sat there and stared at the water coming over the rocks, and I'm standing about 4 feet over. Obviously, if you fall, you're going to get washed away because it was not anything, but I wasn't in danger of falling, really. But my real point was I just stopped, and I just kind of had this moment like, all right, you're this kid from Detroit, Michigan, and you're standing above this river in Utah, and I just really had this overwhelming sense of how lucky I was and how cool this was, and it just permeated my whole body about how cool this was. Did you had a lot of those moments as you're going around? Because it sounds like
And
that's kind of the way you live.
And I had a lot of those types of moments also with that school in Colorado too, because it was this beautiful mountainous. You can see all these mountains. You know, I'm from the Cleveland area. You're from Detroit area. I mean, it's not very pretty. You know,
No.
And I've never really saw that kind of stuff. So yeah, and again with the ocean too, it's totally different sort of scenario. So yeah, I mean, and you know, it's good to do that as much as you can to sort of stop and just sort of absorb it all in. And it's good to be thankful, generally speaking. And that's something I try to do as much of as I can. Be thankful for my health. Be thankful for what my situation in life. Blah blah blah. But you know, it's easy to do a hike and not actually stop and smell the roses, so to speak, and just keep hiking.
Time to go. Got to get there. Got to hurry. And I do a lot of that, too.
And when you're alone for 309 days on a boat, you got a lot of time to think about stuff. So
309. Let me look at the camera and say this. 309 days, guys. That's a year by yourself on the boat. Nobody can get on the boat. He can't get off the boat. People can pull up alongside, but they can't attach to the boat,
Not unless they're in neutral.
If they're in neutral, they can tie off.
If they are in gear, even for a second. So yeah, we could talk about.
They're not.
I'd be a vessel under tow. So what I had to do is I had to remain a vessel underway according to the U.S. Coast Guard standard of a vessel underway, which is actually more or less international. Which means I can't drop an anchor. I can't attach to anything connected to the ground, like a mooring ball or a dock or an iceberg that's run aground.
All right.
I myself cannot run aground. I can skip the bottom. I can just drag, but if I run hard aground and stop, I am no longer a vessel underway. I have stopped, even though I'm aground. But I wasn't. You know, I'm in the middle of the ocean for most of this trip. That really wasn't much of an issue. But because it's like 16,000 feet deep there. You know, I had to remain a vessel underway, just like anybody who does any nonstop trip. If you know, and you know, it's fairly strict, I guess. But you know, it's and I had a tracking device on my boat, so a satellite-based one. So I didn't have to deal with, like, how do we know you actually did it? How do we know you didn't just go out in the Atlantic and do circles? You know what I'm saying?
Have you seen that documentary?
I have.
Dark Water?
Yeah, Deep Water.
Deep Water, okay.
Deep Water is one of the best sailing documentaries you'll ever see. It's on Netflix. You can watch it instantly.
Yep.
And it's a good background for single-handed sailing. And they made a movie about it, that movie called Mercy, recently. It's out.
Is it out now?
I don't know where you see it. It never actually showed in the theaters in the States, which isn't a good sign. Colin Firth played Crowhurst. It is a good movie, but god damn is it depressing. God damn. There's a lot of family in there. They really play the family angle because he had a wife and kids and all the stuff they went through because he died. He killed himself.
Yeah.
He lost his mind in the ocean and jumped off his boat and completely lost his mind. And but anyways.
He fell off.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he completely lost his mind.
Yeah, he did.
But anyways.
Did you ever have any moments where you kind of got a little goofy out there? Or?
No, not really. Part of it was, you know, I'm immersed in this goal that I'm trying to accomplish. I had to take several different sort of mentalities that I normally wouldn't have on sailing or especially on land. Like I had to make peace with drowning, basically make peace with death before I left. I had to truly accept the fact that I might not ever come back to land and I might die in the ocean. And once I've accepted that, there was nothing really to be afraid of. So I could be in a storm.
Did you really accept that? Did you really?
Well, I accepted it as well as anybody can. But yeah, I was prepared to sink the boat before I quit. It was 100% determination. The only way for me to get home
I see what you're
was
saying.
to keep. Like I never once thought about quitting ever. I was the opposite. It was like I'd never, you know, if something went bad, I wouldn't think like, oh, I should quit and go to land. It was the opposite. You know, it was like it just made me stronger and more determined not to quit. You know, but what happens is if you can do this. When I was in storms, like going around Cape Horn or in Alaska, I put the boat upside down or mostly upside down. There was no fear, really. Like you're in a storm, instead of, you know, the problem is fear isn't going to help anything. Freaking out isn't going to help anything, right? Like how in the world is that going to help you when you're alone in the storm? Fear becomes panic. Panic becomes injury. Injury becomes loss of life or loss of vessel. It all starts with fear.
Right.
So, and that's important. If you're a captain, you can't show fear to your crew, even if you're afraid inside.
Right.
You got to be that Rock of Gibraltar thing. So, yeah, I mean, I did it as I accepted my fate, whatever it might be. It wasn't a religious thing because growing up in a cult, that really rained on my religious parade. But, you know, I wasn't, you know, but I just accept, you know, it's fatalistic, but you just sort of accept whatever the outcome is. And it was worse for me to quit than it was to die. Now, you know, it was also a time in my life where I wasn't married. I didn't have children. I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't have anybody looking after me because if you got kids, you cannot have that mentality.
Right.
Right. And so I was single. I'm close. We've gotten, me and my parents got divorced and whatever, but we gotten over whatever issues years ago about the cult and all that. Any of those feelings are long gone, and we got mutual respect and love and all that good stuff. But I don't talk to them all that often. And so, like, it's not a big deal for me to go, long periods of time. And
I've looked at your documentary, and I'm like, wow, I would love to do that. I talk to people about it, and they go, "You would?" And I go, "Yeah, it would, without a doubt, I would love to do it." My only reservation would be if someone in the family passed, and then I thought about it and went, like my mother, for example. Right. What if my mother passed? And I said, well,
how about this? Would you rather they tell you or not tell you? Because that I've dealt with a bit. I struggle with that one. It's, and they, my dad and people, mom, whatever, said like we wouldn't have told you. But honestly, I think I would have wanted to know at the time, but I don't know if it would have been helpful.
Yeah, agreed. Thinking through that question, I thought through that too, and it's funny you asked that. I think I would, because I think I would want to grieve at the time in my own way, and then my mom wants to be cremated, so it's not like I'd miss a funeral, maybe a memorial or something. But no, I think I would want to know.
Yeah, and I had to, because of my situation, I was able to let go of land completely. So basically, land stopped existing. I mean, obviously, I knew it still existed, but in my mind, the whole world was the ocean. Land wasn't my friend. You see, it's sort of the opposite of the way people think when it comes to sailing in the ocean. It's usually not the water that gets you, the waves, the storms. It's all the sharp, pointy things that surround it. It's coastal navigation, strong currents, reefs, rocks. So you want to stay as far as you can from land. You're safer. The further you are from land, the safer you are under those circumstances. The water's deeper, the waves are more rounded, there's less current that can affect the waves. So I really lived in this ocean world where, it's almost like the fish become your family, the boat becomes an extension of yourself. The boat's like my left arm and the wind is my right arm.
I was going to save that for the end, but in the documentary, the barnacle story of how you would clear the barnacles off your boat, but then towards the end you figured, well, shit, they made it with me this far and they're alive and living here, kind of my friends. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna keep them around. Yeah, it's gonna slow me down, but I'm gonna keep them around for a little longer.
They were all above the water line, so that was good.
Okay.
I didn't have, and I put 2 coats of bottom paint on before I left, and it was black bottom paint, and when I came back, my bottom was blue. Meaning I wore off 2 coats of paint in 27,000 miles.
Woo.
But the process of that kept any growth.
Okay.
And so, the bottom was okay, but it was on the back of the boat above, still looked ugly. All these big barnacles, these tube barnacles or gooseneck barnacles, they call them. And, they're ugly, but, they're my only friends, so I didn't cut them off. And I made them played a game. I made like awesome. A colony of them.
They were your Wilson.
Yeah, they're like, it's like an ant farm. I didn't name them or anything, but they were still my, well, there's a bunch of them. They're all ugly. So
you had time.
Yeah, I did, definitely. I had time.
Well, no, okay, so you've enlightened me to a lot of, you okay on time?
Oh, yeah, we got a little bit of time, yeah.
So, you're coming around, and again, folks, go watch the documentary. There's a free one on PBS you can download, and then there's an hour 44 one, which I highly recommend that you watch.
The director's cut. Yeah, so it's Red Dot in the Ocean. Yeah. All you got to do is Google Red Dot in the Ocean PBS. If you have Amazon Prime, you can see it there. The version on Amazon Prime is about 15 minutes longer. We had to cut it up a bit for the time slot for PBS.
Okay.
And so there's, if you want to see, there's more, obviously, with the extra 15 minutes. And I think it digs a little more into my past or something like that. But that's the original. The original version is on Amazon Prime.
I'm pretty sure that's the one I saw.
Or you can buy it, and then I'll get like 1 penny out of it.
Is that what you're getting out of it these days?
I don't get much. But whatever. Who cares? I didn't do it to make money,
So you had all these cameras on board. You had one camera. You had you mentioned earlier you had a GoPro and it broke early. So
yeah, right. So it's a bit of a miracle they could put together the film. When the boat went more or less upside down in the Bering Sea, it threw a lot of stuff. And even though the camera was in a waterproof case that was supposed to be shock-proof and everything else, it wasn't knockdown-proof. And it got thrown hard enough that it broke it inside the case.
Whoa!
And that was the end of that. and we didn't have any money. I had one little crappy GoPro. It was a Contour, which was the competition to GoPro. And it was when they just came out, so I didn't know what to get or what was what.
Yeah.
I probably should have got a GoPro.
So
it broke.
We forgot to mention that. So Crab was the group you're doing the sale for, but
Right.
what sponsors got behind you to help you out with a little money or sales or?
Yeah, it was really hard to do because you go into some guy's office who runs some company and you explain what you're doing and what kind of boat you're using and everything. And either they look at you like either you're crazy or you're going to die.
Right.
And nobody wants to get behind either of those.
Right.
But people did, and it was a fundraiser for Crab, and we ended up raising $120,000 for the organization. Don Backey passed away not long after I got back, and they had a rough transition period. But that $120,000 got them through the transition. They got a new executive director now that's better than ever. He's doing a great job.
Cool.
So it really did help. It actually saved the organization. The whole organization would have fell apart if we didn't raise $120,000, which we had no idea that was the case when we left.
So when we get done with this, make sure I have their information or email me their information, and I'll make sure that it goes on the end of this video.
Yeah. And I got my own nonprofit too, so you can donate to both.
Well, it's all going to be in there. So
so sponsorship was
we'll
hard.
Put it below, but sponsorship was hard.
So that's if I had more money, I would have had a proper boat. I would have had proper equipment. A lot of the equipment I had, I took off the boat. I sailed across the Atlantic twice. It already had 2 transatlantics worth of wear and tear on it.
So do you think if you decided to do this today, knowing what you know now, it would be much easier, not the physical accomplishment of doing it, but getting sponsors? And
I'm trying to do another big single-handed trip, although I'm really, I've got a lot on my plate with the nonprofit, and we got a lot going on. So I'm not able to dedicate all my time to it, but I would like to do a trip even bigger. I'd like to do like a double crazy circumnavigation thing. I got a friend right now, a guy named Randall Reeves. Check out, if you want to check it out, Figure 8 Voyage is what it's called. He's trying to circumnavigate the Americas and the world, both nonstop. Well, it's single-handed. He's going to stop for the Northwest Passage part.
Okay.
And I don't know, he might stop a few other times depending on what happens. But and no one has done that, and that'd be a hell of a trip. He tried already last year, and he boat twice. He got bad damage, and he made it around the world, but he didn't make it around the Americas too. I wish him the best of luck, and I like the idea. It's been 50 years since the first person sailed alone around the world, nonstop, single-handed. There are other potential circumnavigations, long-distance, single-handed circumnavigations that could be done, like I did going around the Americas. And I just like the idea of people trying to do new things and, sort of so it's not just, going around the world, don't get me wrong, it's terribly difficult because of the Southern Ocean.
Right.
And the Southern Ocean is just a madhouse of storms. And there's a race right now down there called the Golden Globe Race where half the boats have already been knocked out, and there's people getting, some guy got his back hurt and almost died. I mean, all sorts of crazy things happening in the Southern Ocean. But anyways, I get past Alaska on this trip, and in the Pacific, things start to warm up and dry out, and you're getting warmer, heading towards the equator. But then you end dealing with this really wide trade wind bank, the easterly trades, which was a bitch. And, things broke, and I was taking on water. My boat was basically leaking. I was basically sinking for the last 16,000 miles. I had to bail it out with an empty can of corn. So that's the only thing small enough to fit in a little bilge. All the bilge pumps had broke by this point, manual and automatic. Cape Horn is, Cape Horn's a difficult place. Lots of storms. It's got a bad reputation for a good reason. And so I had a lot of heavy weather. And I think the hardest thing about Cape Horn was really the mental aspects I thought it was going to kill me. I thought like, shit, man, I'm slowly sailing to my death, basically. Like I felt like I was sailing into a meat grinder or something.
Yeah, I went back and downloaded that free book. It was written in the 1800s about the guy that sailed. I can't.
Joshua Slocum.
I think so.
Yeah, around the world, sure.
And talking about savages and
he was in the Straits of
tax on
Magellan,
his,
right?
his deck and everything. Yeah, and every description I've ever heard about Cape Horn, there's a reason people pay thousands and thousands of dollars to go through the canal rather than go down.
Yeah, it's about $1,700 to $2,000 to get through the Panama Canal, and that depends on how many people you got to rent to line handlers and the size of your boat. Yeah, but it was roughly a couple of grand. But I get around Cape Horn, and that, of course, was big. It's a funny thing. We're trying to raise money for this organization, and there was a time in the Pacific for a couple of months where Crab, the nonprofit, had nothing, and they had so little money that Don Backey was funding the organization out of his own bank account because it was completely broke.
Wow.
So it's not like we're raising much money at that point.
Right.
Once I got around Cape Horn, I had the worst parts done, the Arctic and the Northwest Passage and Cape Horn. And now people actually was like, oh, my God, he might actually pull this shit off.
Right.
And that's when, like, and there was an article written by the Washington Post.
People start jumping on the bandwagon.
And
then,
yeah,
didn't
all
they?
of a sudden, yeah. And then it was like, whoop, you know, we raised almost all the money after Cape Horn.
You know, it says that sounds. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. I'm not. We raised the money. I'm not complaining when it came, but
Right.
it is. So it's just a funny. It is what it is. But so and then coming back up from the Southern Ocean, you have the boat's falling apart at this point. Basically, everything is broken and everything's breaking, and it's just and I'm just my engine was broke at this point. A lot of things were broke. And but I make it up eventually past the equator and into the North Atlantic, out of the South Atlantic, and I eventually make it my way back. A bunch more issues, which you can see in the film Red Dot in the Ocean.
Yes.
And
Please watch.
day 308, I'm sitting there, and I can see the finish line. It's the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. It's the southern entrance to Chesapeake. And when my incoming line has gone over my outgoing line, I drew my circle, and I've done it. I've circumnavigated.
Right.
And so I can see it. It's just like a couple miles away. And the wind dies, and my engine's broke. So I'm just sitting there bobbing. And this guy came along who's following. It's called a red dot in the ocean because my tracking device, I was a red dot on the tracking device.
Okay.
So some guy had been following the tracking device and came out in this little boat and threw a 6-pack of Pabst Blue Ribbon at me, which it's not very good beer, but it was like Don Perignon 44
Sure.
at this point, And he throws me a gas station sandwich, was like the greatest thing ever. And so I'm sitting there drinking my Pabst, eating a sandwich, looking, thinking, okay, the wind's going to pick up, I'll sail in. Well, there were strong northerly winds in the northern half of the bay. And when that happens, sometimes the bay just sort of flushes itself out. The wind pushes all the water out of the bay. So the sun goes down, and I get pushed 16 miles backwards. And I'm getting pushed towards the damn beach, and and there's no wind. And I'm like, oh, my God. After 308 days and 27,000 miles, I'm gonna wind up shipwrecked after seeing the finish line on freaking Virginia Beach.
You just climbed Everest. You're 10 feet from the end.
You're 10 feet from the end, and so I mean, you can imagine that. And so I would have had to do the whole thing over again. But and the boat wouldn't have made it. That boat was worn out. So luckily, I took every gust of wind. I put up as much sail as I could, and I'd fight my way off of this sandbar, off this beach, and then it would die, and I'd head back towards it, and then back and forth all night like that. And I could hear the breaking waves sometimes in the darkness.
How much stress did you have going on in your life?
That was. And I drank all 6 Paps, which didn't help. Maybe it did help. Maybe it eliminated the stress, but it certainly didn't help with my fatigue level.
Right.
But then again, whatever. The sun rose in the morning, and the wind picked up, and on the 309th day, I sailed into Chesapeake Bay, becoming the first person in history to do a nonstop single-handed circumnavigation of the Americas.
You the man.
And my first landfall was Annapolis. So although I had completed the circumnavigation at the mouth, my one line went over the other line.
Right.
I didn't want to step foot on land until I got back to Annapolis, where I left from originally, to sort of bring it back to Annapolis.
Yeah, and they had a little party waiting for you.
They did, and it was a trip, man, because I didn't know what to expect. In a lot of ways, I'd have been happy with a 6-pack of beer and a shower.
Right.
I mean, that would have been a lot right there. But yeah, it sort of snowballed, and governor was there, the mayor was there. Gary Jobson, who's like sailing royalty, won America's Cup once. He was there.
Right.
He's like the MC, and hundreds of people were there. And I come back, and I haven't really been interacting with people, as you can imagine, for a while.
Right.
And I literally get right off the boat, walk 50 feet, and I'm on stage, and they're looking at me, I'm looking at them, they're looking at me, I'm looking at them. But it actually worked, and I didn't sleep the entire night before. I tried to sleep. I went into Lake Ogleton, which is near Annapolis, and dropped an anchor. I dislocated my tracking device because I was afraid that if some of my friends might see I'm close, they might come out and I don't want to party or something. And so I guess I dislocated it too late, or that built-in battery or something.
Okay.
And so I'm laying in bed, and it's like 1 a.m, and I know I got to get up early, and I got to come in and finish this trip, come into the dock in Annapolis. And I'm not very far, but I hear this noise. Be quiet, don't and they're fucking shouting. My friends hijacked a 25-foot boat from somebody. I mean, it wasn't stolen,
Right,
but
right,
they basically.
Yeah.
I mean, and they show up at 1 a.m. with a bunch of booze, and there's 4 of them, and they're all half drunk already.
Sure.
And I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. So we sat there all night, like drinking and partying and whatnot until the sun came up, and they left, and then I've got to go freaking do this.
I was going
homecoming.
to say at the end of the documentary, you look a little glassy-eyed at the end.
Yeah, but I was able to keep up with Gary Jobson. I was able to have a little quick. None of that was
did
practice.
great.
Yeah, he asked me if I seen any pirates. I told him every time I looked in the mirror. And I was able to pull off little quips like that. So yeah, it was good. And like I say, we raised $120,000, and yeah. And so I realized at that point I was never going to stop sailing. So I decided, why don't I do it in a way that's going to sort of give back to the ocean? So I created Ocean Research Project. It's a research-based organization that uses sailboats to do research. And the very short or whatever of it is that your average research vessel is $25,000 a day. It's crazy. And they're relatively large power boats. The technologies needed to do ocean research have gotten smaller and less power hungry, just like computers used to take up entire rooms.
Like this podcast I just brought to you.
Yeah,
across
exactly.
country.
So the same things happen with research equipment. We can do research on a sailboat today that we never could have done 20 years ago, just because of the technology. Imagine 20 years from now.
Okay.
We can operate at less than 10% of, well, a little over 10, but we can operate about $3,000 a day versus 25,000 a day.
Sure.
Collecting the same data.
Right.
Now, you'll always need the big boats for some things. I'm not trying to eliminate the big boats, but what this means is that ocean research, especially stuff like Arctic or open ocean, which is very remote, is only really accessible to top scientists who have access to large funding. All over the world, we have scientists trying to answer important scientific questions that don't have that type of funding. So what I'm trying to do is build a global fleet of research-ready sailboats, making research more accessible to the sort of global scientific community, making it less expensive, integrating things like drones and underwater vehicles, remote and autonomous underwater vehicles.
What a great idea.
And and if I can pull it off, I will change the way that research is being conducted in the ocean, because nothing like this exists today, and I will change the world in a small little way.
Well, in a big way, you're making it more accessible. You're making a dollar go a lot farther.
Oh yeah, well we struggle with funding, so we got to stretch every dollar.
No, absolutely.
So
we'll clip this up, or I'll clip this up, however you need, and you use it however the hell you want to use it.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And we spent 2013 and 14. We did there's a lot of plastic trash in the ocean.
Yeah.
So we went out and spent 70 days in the Atlantic garbage patch out doing research, and then I found an abandoned boat. Our engine broke. We got stuck in a doldrum for 23 days. I mean, I almost died at some other point. It was. It turned out to be a lot crazier than we expected. Well, we got all that research done.
Right.
The next year, we sailed from San Francisco to Yokohama, Japan, nonstop on a 29-foot day sailor. Our boat is a 42-foot steel schooner, but it's on the East Coast.
Okay.
I didn't have a boat on the West Coast, so I convinced this company. It was a brand new model. Like, look, you get the PR. It's a day sailor, but you get the PR to say, look, but it can cross an ocean, and I get the boat to use, and they can sell it when it gets to Japan. They had a broker over there. So that's what, that whole thing was a shit show, too. The boat wasn't ready when I showed up. It was this big rush to get it done. We didn't have any crazy storms. The easterlies are fairly forgiving, the easterly trade
So you
winds.
didn't have a shakeout cruise or anything?
No, the shakeout cruise was to Japan.
Oh.
We went out in a gale the first night, actually, and I was really happy about that, because I figured if anything breaks, I'll still be within 50 miles or so of California.
Good call.
I could I could still motor back. I had enough fuel. And then we moved up to the Arctic. The thing about plastics research is a lot of the issue of plastic trash in the ocean, we have a fairly good idea of what's out there at this point. A lot of it's going what they call upstream, which means it's becoming more about policy change than it is about data collection. So the way that it works is you usually have 3 steps in process. The first step is someone's got to collect the data. The second step is outreach, which is teaching people about the issue.
Okay.
The third step is policy change, which means getting things done in the government, laws made that will make a change within the environmental issue.
Got it.
And we're really at a point with the plastic trash thing. We need more policy change. We also need a lot of outreach. There's people trying to clean up the plastic trash in the ocean. I think it's a fool's errand. And that's a whole long subject too. But basically, we need to change the way we're interacting with this one-time use material. I mean, if you think about it, you go into 7-Eleven, you get a cup of coffee. You stir that cup of coffee with that little stupid black plastic straw.
Yep.
And you'll use that straw for 3 to 5 seconds of your life. When you're dead, your kids are dead, your grandkids are dead, that plastic straw is still on this planet. Why in the world are we using a material meant to last hundreds of years for a one-time use application? I can tell you why. It's cheap and it's convenient.
Yep.
And we love cheap and convenient.
You're darn right we
So it's about sort of changing the culture of how we think about and interact with these materials. And you could put that across the board on a lot of environmental things about
Sure.
us just being less wasteful, generally speaking. But anyways, we did some plastic trash stuff up in the Arctic, but we really have been working since 2015 with Ocean Melting Greenland. It's a group of scientists out of NASA. Basically, a warmer, saltier water column is coming up from the Atlantic and eating the glaciers in Greenland from underneath, speeding up the rate of the glacier. The Greenland ice cap has about 21 feet of sea level rise in it. If it were to melt, global 21 feet. And it's melting faster than anything else on Earth. Antarctica has its issues, don't get me wrong.
Right.
Antarctica is also, like, you don't really know what all's going on. You know, anything could happen down there.
Right,
but
right,
we know
right.
that Greenland is dumping, it's something like 3 Chesapeake Bays worth of water a season or something crazy. It's
Holy
a huge,
cow.
it's a large amount of water.
Right.
So we went up there lowering probes, and we had a steel boat at this point, 42.
Yeah.
We had no money when I got back from this trip, so I had to get some half-rusted-out, funky-ass old steel boat. And, again, you spend a lot of time fixing it, repairing it. It's the same
Right.
old story. And it was never really meant for this, but, you know, just like the Alban Vega wasn't meant to sail around the Americas. But,
Right.
you know, whatever. Near the Pearson wasn't meant to cross an ocean.
Right.
You just do what you got to do, you know. But, and so we've really, to have legitimacy within the scientific community, you got to publish scientific papers.
Right.
And so we published 2 papers now with NASA, one from our 2015, another from our 2016 expedition. We have some short videos. We brought a cameraman 2016. So if you Google or go to YouTube, it's on YouTube. Just go to 2016 Greenland Climate Project. We
Okay.
have 4 videos, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. And you can sort of they're short videos, but they show us, you know, punching through ice and lowering probes. And
Well, I'll link everything. We'll put that as a playlist on when this video finishes. I can put those up on the screen. So when this finishes, they'll be there, and you just click on them and go.
And in 2016, we came back, and the boat's pretty beat up, and the engine broke, like completely broke, right when I got back, thankfully, to Annapolis. Made it back from the Arctic, but and it was just like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? We don't have any money. We've basically we've completely worn out our old research vessel, and it was really a difficult. 2017 was a difficult time because initially, at least the first half or so, 'cause it's like, what the hell are we going to do? Research organization, we got no funding. Nobody wants to give us grants. We compete, we try. I mean, we're writing grants, and it's a lot harder to get funding than you think. Now we're not.
Yeah.
You're not directly linked to a university. I mean, either you get funding through a National Science Foundation, NSF, or like NOAA. Or a foundation, or maybe like Nat Geo or something. If it's NSF or NOAA, you're competing against people with PhDs who run entire departments in universities.
Right.
Even those guys have a 10% chance of getting it, 90% chance of not getting it. We don't stand a chance competing against. One time I did a big grant, found out later I was competing with the University of Maryland, which of course I didn't get that grant. So you try to get foundation funding, and a lot of foundations talk a lot about supporting climate research in the Arctic. Tell them to write a check, and it's a whole nother story.
Yep.
So it's been a huge struggle. But anyways, the sort of beauty is we were really at a low point, really struggling. How are we going to move this forward? And doing my podcast, I got a podcast called Single-Handed Sailing, about sailing and whatever else I feel like talking about. And I was just going on about how a Bruce Roberts 65 steel boat would be a great research vessel. And somebody was listening, and they talked to somebody earlier that day who had a Bruce Roberts 65 who was talking about getting rid of it and potentially donating it to a nonprofit. He built it specifically for the Arctic. So it was made with thicker steel. It's a very heavy boat with watertight bulkheads, and it's supposed to be polar bear proof. You had some fear that a polar bear would climb up there and eat them. Yeah, it's got really high lifelines and shit.
Okay.
But there's, the devil's in the details. The boat's about 80% finished. The guy never finished the boat. And now he's in his 70s, and he got older, and he just couldn't, he just
Finish my dream.
Yeah, so we need to raise like $75,000, and we'll spend the next year or so trying to get this boat finished. And once we do, we can take a whole team of scientists on this boat.
Cool.
It has 800 gallons of diesel, huge range, which is important in the Arctic. It's a long way between, fuel places, gas stations, more or less. And so that's really the flagship that we've been trying to get. And once we finish it, which I don't know how the hell we're going to get $75,000 in some ways. I've never raised anything like that because except going around the Americas, but obviously that was different. But at the same time, I know we'll do it. Like, I'm completely confident. I think by 2020 we'll be using that boat in the Arctic, and I don't think it'll be ready by next summer. but by 2020 we'll be using it. So this year we jumped on somebody else's boat to do research in the Arctic because they're going up there anyways. We were sort of in between boats, so to speak. Our boat wasn't finished, and so we jumped on this other boat, a couple of Canadian pilot guys who were a little younger, early 30s. And it was actually great. They were great. It was a great time. Everybody's around the same age. Everybody had sort of same mentality.
Right.
And so, but unfortunately, it didn't open up. So we got all of our research done because it was on the eastern side of the Northwest Passage. But they had to sail back to Halifax, and they're going to go down to Cuba or something like that and hang out down there for the winter. Sounds pretty good.
Yeah,
and
no doubt.
Yeah, but so yeah, that's sort of the long and short of it. It's been a lot of challenge trying to prove to scientists that a sailboat is a legitimate research platform. I've had a lot of pushback from that. Scientists are skeptical by nature. They're going to try to prove something is wrong before they prove it's right.
Right.
And so it takes a lot of proving, basically. And we did a lot with working with NASA and getting those published papers and successful expedition. And with the plastics, that data went into papers too. We didn't co-author them. That's the difference. With the plastics, and we got a mention in the paper, like an honorable mention.
Sure.
They used our data, but we didn't actually co-author them.
Author.
Yeah, unlike these other ones, which is hilarious, by the way, because I never went to college. And everybody else who co-authored it's like a top NASA scientist, PhD, and then there's my dumbass.
And Matt.
Yeah, and Matt. And they do put me at the end, by the way. I'm usually like the last name. Well, I don't give a shit.
Hey, as long as you're in there somewhere.
Yeah. So it's everything's been moving. Nicole, now I'm not a scientist, right? The only reason I created this organization before I had met Nicole. Nicole worked on a NOAA research vessel for 4 years in the Chesapeake Bay. She had a lot of experience in the field and working equipment and sensors.
Who's Nicole?
Nicole is my girlfriend. She is
the
scientist in the organization. Without her, I think the organization would have folded up. Not that I'm one to quit easy, but I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. She's the one who came in and actually understood the process.
Sure.
And it's really been a teamwork effort. She's the captain of the science, and I'm the captain of the boat.
Make a good team.
Yeah, exactly. We all have our roles, and we all have things we're in charge of. And now she's going to school to get a PhD. She just started. She only had a bachelor's, but she had a huge amount of field experience. So now she's actually getting involved in a NASA program with Goddard Space Center, and they're going to pay for some of the school, which is good because college is expensive. And so we're getting a lot of great connections from what we've already done, and the reputation we're building as a proper research using sailboats. The new boat's going to be huge. We're probably going to have to rent some berths to and from the Caribbean. Check out oceanresearchproject.org, by the way. That's the website. You can see the videos there. And in 2020, or maybe earlier than that, if we do start renting berths, it'll be an opportunity to jump on a boat and sail to the Arctic with us, more or less.
Very cool. So to put a bow on this thing, because I know you got to go, man, you went from curious, you had some issues, you went from curious, you're a learner, but you weren't a traditional learner. You took it upon yourself to just go out and learn and be an adventurer, for lack of a better term. And no, that's the perfect term, an adventurer. You wanted to sail. You went and taught yourself. You made it into an adventure, you did service work. I'm finding as I get older that, about service, about helping others, and that's what really fulfills you. It'd be great to have $10 million in the bank, but, wouldn't it be great?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I wouldn't complain.
But
the lotto is pretty high right now.
But that service, yeah, no kidding. I got my ticket somewhere at home. Hopefully my wife doesn't throw it away when she gets home. But that service part and doing what I do with the veterans and some other things that I do just makes me feel so damn good.
Yeah.
And if I could couple that into what you're doing, oh my gosh. So you're doing that. And in that big sailing adventure, while you probably didn't think it was going to turn into something, is just morphed into. You're getting mentioned in papers that are going out with
I'm
NASA.
getting co-authored with NASA papers. But I did not when I made that goal right back at Eagle Rock at that school. I graduated when I was 20. I didn't go back to high school until I was 17. And I graduated. When at that school, it's pretty normal. I mean, a lot of the kids are graduating, 19, 20, even 21 sometimes.
Okay.
But I had no idea what starting a nonprofit. That was my third goal, to start a nonprofit. What in the hell kind of nonprofit? I didn't even know anything about nonprofits when I started this one. Yeah. But I didn't know anything about sailing when I bought my first sailboat. So, it's just the way I do it. It's sort of a crash course in education. And, there's definitely, if I had a master's degree in running a nonprofit management, I'm sure it wouldn't have hurt. But then I would have been in huge debt. I didn't not go to college because I wasn't interested in the education. It was because we had no money.
Right.
I had no money. My family didn't have anything to give me for college. And it's like, I looked at it, I applied, and it was like, do I really want to be $60,000 in debt for a political science degree? Because that's what I would have went for
Okay.
some liberal arts degree
Right.
that I couldn't do anything with anyways.
Right.
Like, no. And be honest, there's not a university on planet Earth that teaches you how to lead Arctic expeditions on a sailboat. It's just it's something you learn through experience. It's we still have a long way to go in a lot of ways, but we've come a long way also. And you never know what the future is going to be like. You just sort of keep moving ahead. And even when I started the nonprofit, coming back from a trip around the Americas, sorry, I'm getting blown up here.
Yeah, I know. We'll end this up in a sec.
The first one, I didn't know if I was going to start this one or another one called Tools for Schools, where I was going to supply, starting in Gambia. When I was in Gambia, I set this up.
Okay.
I toured different public schools. And the idea is if I could get donations, I could go to Dakar in Senegal, which is a big bustling town,
Okay.
and I could buy chalk, paper, rulers, basic school supplies, tools for schools.
Sure.
And then sail them down to Gambia, and because these schools have nothing.
Right.
And then start with Gambia and expand it all over the world, where you're using a sailboat as, because you can put a lot of stuff on a sailboat.
Yep.
And you fill it up with school supplies, and you take it to some country, and just give them the educational tools they need.
Combining your loves.
Yeah, and so it really been back and but at the end of the day, the Ocean Research Organization, it would utilize my skills to the fullest, because it's not just me sailing to Gambia. I'm sailing to the Arctic. I'm going out to the middle of the Atlantic. I want to use my skills to the fullest potential. And this Ocean Research Organization was going to take all the skills I have as a sailor and push me to my absolute limits to get better and better, where I didn't feel the same way if I did the other organization. So yeah, it's, you don't really know, you just sort of go through life. You don't,
Right.
I don't know. I never knew, I don't know. I mean, we have this big boat now. Obviously we still have to finish it, but it's just ironic. I've been talking about a 65-foot Bruce Roberts for years, and now here we go. I got one, sitting an hour and a half north of here. So.
Well done, my friend. We'll wrap it up there because I know you got to go.
Yeah, so check out the website, oceanresearchproject.org.
Okay.
Check out Red Dot in the Ocean. Like I said, you can Google it, PBS. You watch it for free. If you want to buy a boat or sell a boat, I work at Eastport Yacht Sales. You can just email me at matt@eastportyachtsales.com. And, yeah, I'd be happy to help. And, I think ultimately, we all are capable of so much. We're all capable of more than we can ever imagine. And there's so many stories of people out there that have accomplished just so far above and beyond.
Right.
And part of it is you have to believe in yourself. I mean, there's definitely a component. But you also have to take risks in life. Reward lives in the house of risk. You have to take risks in life, or else you're not going to. But you want to take educated risks, right? You're not going to.
Sure.
You're not going to invest $1 million in a stock in the stock market without looking at that company. I wasn't going to sail around the Americas without sailing across the Atlantic twice, and before that, I sailed the Eastern Seaboard and blah. But still, we need to take risks, and ultimately, fear is a preventative. It prevents us from doing stupid stuff. But you have to. Fear can prevent you from accomplishing. It can prevent you from meeting your wife, talking to that girl at the bar, or whatever.
Right.
Or getting a job or whatever. So. You have to learn to control fear, or fear will control you. And it's not about being fearless. I am not a fearless person. There's all sorts of things I'm afraid of.
Right.
But it's just a matter of learning how to control fear. And the mentality you need on a crazy sailing trip is not the normal mentality of me walking around on land or doing a research expedition. Because as a captain, you have crew, and the crew, you can't just... It changes the game completely when you have crew. You're responsible for human life. If you die in the ocean alone, single-handed, it's like, well, whatever. I mean, you didn't take anybody else out with you.
Yeah.
But so, anyways, I guess just one I want to leave off is that that we are all capable of more than we can ever imagine. And if you believe in yourself and you work hard and sacrifice and take risks, it's unbelievable. You'll surprise yourself. It's unbelievable what we can accomplish.
Well put, my friend. Well,
all right, thank you.
On that, I'll shake your hand. I'll say
Yep.
thanks. I'll reach across there, and we'll end it there. Thanks,
right.
man.
Well, if the Holy Ghost can speak to me, then I can hear the devil too. Watch me as I go further, further away from you. But sometimes you cannot go both ways, and it looks like I might go back. One day I'm moving forward, and the next I don't know where I'm at. So I just keep on moving forward. No sense in turning back. Oh, as hard as I may try, it's as hard as I could fall. When I'm reaching to the sky, it's hard to let go of it all. So I just keep on moving forward. No sense in turning back. Oh, like a child learning to walk, sometimes I fall to the floor. But I get back up